Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the Earth vessel Artemis, watching the massive Arkan Confederation flagship approach. Its crystalline spires stretched for kilometers, catching starlight in patterns that were undoubtedly meant to inspire awe. She allowed herself a small smile. The Confederation's penchant for grandiose displays would work to humanity's advantage. "Final systems check complete," announced Captain Rodriguez from behind her. "All masking protocols are functioning perfectly. As far as their sensors can tell, we're running on fusion drives barely capable of reaching light speed." Sarah nodded, straightening her deliberately outdated diplomatic uniform. After 15 years of careful preparation, humanity was finally ready for first contact with the dominant power in this sector of the galaxy. Everything about their approach had been meticulously crafted, from their accidentally leaked subspace transmissions to the seemingly primitive design of their ships. The truth, of course, was far different. The Artemis carried enough computational power in its quantum cores to run a small planet. Its gravitic drives could cross the galaxy in weeks, and its defensive systems could shrug off anything short of a direct hit from a neutron star. But the Arkan Confederation would see none of that. "Incoming transmission," the ship's AI announced, its voice carefully modulated to sound mechanical and limited. "The Confederation requests docking protocols." Sarah took a deep breath. "Send them our basic capabilities. Let's hope they're as arrogant as our scout probes suggested." The response came quickly, dripping with barely concealed condescension. "Earth vessel, we are transmitting simplified docking procedures suitable for your current technological level. Please follow them precisely to avoid any unfortunate accidents." "Acknowledged with gratitude," Sarah replied, making sure to sound slightly nervous. "We are honored by the Confederation's guidance." As the Artemis was drawn into the massive docking bay, Sarah reviewed the intelligence they'd gathered over the last decade. The Arkan Confederation had ruled this sector for millennia through a combination of technological superiority and economic exploitation. New species were welcomed into the fold, then gradually stripped of their resources and autonomy through a web of complex treaties and technical dependencies. But the Confederation had grown complacent. Their technology had stagnated. Their control systems hadn't been meaningfully updated in centuries. Most importantly, they'd forgotten that true innovation comes from necessity and challenge, not comfort and power. "Ambassador," Captain Rodriguez said quietly, "our passive scans are already mapping their entire command and control network. Their security is primitive." Sarah allowed herself another small smile. "Excellent. Remember, everyone, from this moment forward, we are an eager, somewhat naive species grateful for the Confederation's wisdom. We're here to learn, to trade, and to eventually join their grand alliance." The docking clamps engaged with a gentle thud. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the welcoming committee, a group of tall, crystalline beings dressed in ornate robes. Their body language radiated the casual superiority of those who had never faced a serious challenge to their power. "Let's go make some new friends," Sarah said, straightening her outdated uniform one final time. "And remember, we're just simple humans, barely out of our solar system, eager to learn from our betters." As she walked toward the airlock, Sarah thought about the other ships Earth had secretly dispatched to this sector. While the Confederation focused on the Artemis and its seemingly primitive crew, those vessels were making contact with other subjugated species, laying the groundwork for what was to come. The Confederation had ruled through technological superiority for thousands of years. They were about to learn that technology wasn't everything, especially when you didn't understand half of what you were using. But that lesson would come later. For now, Sarah had a role to play. The airlock cycled, and she put on her best expression of wide-eyed wonder. Time to show the Confederation exactly what they expected to see, and nothing more. "Esteemed representatives of the Arkan Confederation," she said, bowing slightly deeper than necessary, "on behalf of Earth, we come seeking wisdom and friendship." The crystalline beings sparkled in satisfaction, clearly pleased by her show of deference. They had no way of knowing that every facet of their bodies was being scanned and analyzed by sensors they couldn't detect, that every word they spoke was being cross-referenced against decades of secretly gathered intelligence. The game had begun, and humanity was playing for keeps. 3 months into their cultural exchange with the Arkan Confederation, Sarah Chen sat in her modestly appointed quarters aboard the Confederation's capital station, reviewing encrypted reports from Earth's covert network. The room's apparent simplicity masked a web of quantum sensors that recorded everything happening within 50 kilometers of her position. Another trade delegation arrived from the Meridian Systems. Her AI assistant whispered through a subvocal link that the Confederation's sensors registered as a basic medical implant. Their ships show signs of recent weapons fire. Sarah's fingers danced across her datapad, making it appear she was struggling with basic Confederation translation protocols, while actually coordinating movements of Earth's stealth ships throughout the sector. The Confederation's been increasing pressure on their outer colonies, she noted, right on schedule. The Meridians weren't the first species to seek audience with the primitive humans. Over the past weeks, representatives from a dozen subjugated worlds had made contact, each sharing stories of the Confederation's increasingly aggressive resource demands and punitive treaties. A chime announced a visitor. Sarah quickly switched her displays to show simple trade manifests. "Enter," she called, putting on the slightly overwhelmed expression she'd cultivated. High Administrator Verlax entered, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that humans had learned to read as smug satisfaction. "Ambassador Chen, I trust you're finding our data systems more manageable now." "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied with carefully measured gratitude. "Though I must admit, some of the economic protocols still confuse me. On Earth, we use much simpler systems." Naturally, Verlax's tone carried the patronizing warmth of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Your species will learn." "Speaking of learning, the Council has reviewed your petition for increased trade rights." Sarah straightened, letting excitement show on her face. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. "That's wonderful news. We've worked so hard to prove ourselves worthy." Indeed, Verlax's crystal lattices shifted to what humans had labeled his benevolent authority configuration. "The Council is prepared to grant Earth provisional trade status. Of course, this will require accepting certain technological assistance from the Confederation." "Assistance?" Sarah asked, already knowing what was coming. "Merely some mandatory upgrades to your ship's navigation and communication systems. Standard procedure for all new trading partners. For safety, you understand." Sarah fought back a smile. The upgrades were actually control systems designed to let the Confederation monitor, and if necessary, disable any ship using them. The same systems they used to subjugate dozens of other species. "That's so generous," she gushed, "though our engineers may need help understanding such advanced technology." "We'll provide specialists," Verlax assured her. "They'll ensure everything is properly integrated." After Verlax left, Sarah waited exactly 30 seconds before activating her secure link to Captain Rodriguez, still aboard the Artemis. They took the bait. "How are our primitive systems holding up to their inspection?" "Perfectly," Rodriguez replied. "Their engineers are having a wonderful time explaining basic physics to our crew. Meanwhile, we've mapped 90% of their command and control architecture. You should see their faces when we struggle with simple diagnostic tools while our quantum processors crack their encryption in microseconds." Sarah pulled up another report, this one detailing the growing network of resistance among the Confederation's subordinate species and our other projects. "Right on schedule. The Meridians are already spreading word about Earth's sympathetic stance. 3 more species have requested private meetings, and our deep cover agents report increasing unrest in the outer systems." Sarah nodded, though she knew Rodriguez couldn't see it. The Confederation's getting nervous. They're pushing their subject worlds harder, demanding more resources, more concessions, making our job easier. "Speaking of which," Rodriguez added, "you'll love this. Remember those mandatory upgrades they're planning to install in our ships? We've already reverse-engineered the control protocols. Give the word, and we can turn their entire network against them. Not yet, Sarah cautioned. Let them think their noose is tightening around our neck. The more systems they try to compromise, the more access we get to their infrastructure. She paused, checking the quantum-encrypted feed from Earth's hidden observers throughout Confederation space. How are our friends in the Meridian systems doing with those obsolete defense systems we secretly provided? The Confederation's latest attempt to inspect their shipping lanes failed spectacularly. Apparently, their most advanced sensors couldn't detect anything amiss until half their patrol fleet mysteriously lost power. Sarah allowed herself a quiet laugh. And I assume everyone believes it was just another case of the Meridian's infamous technical difficulties. Of course. Though I hear the repair crews are getting quite frustrated trying to figure out why their diagnostic tools keep giving them contradictory readings. Sarah stood and walked to her window, watching the endless stream of ships moving through Confederation space. Each one carried a piece of humanity's grand design, hidden technologies, secret alliances, carefully crafted deceptions. The Confederation saw what they expected. A young species stumbling its way into galactic society. They never thought to look deeper. Maintain course, she ordered. Let's show our gracious hosts just how eager we are to accept their assistance. After all, we're just simple humans, doing our best to learn from our betters. The game continued, and with each move, the Confederation's position grew weaker, though they were still too arrogant to notice. Sarah wondered how long it would take them to realize that their greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity's technology, but rather their patience and capacity for long-term planning. Time would tell, and humanity had all the time in the world. The emergency alarms in Capital Station's administrative sector had been blaring for 6 hours straight. Sarah Chen watched from her humble quarters as Confederation security forces rushed past her window for the third time that morning. Their crystalline forms flickered with patterns that her eye assistant translated as extreme agitation. Situation update, she subvocalized, appearing to anyone watching as if she were merely sipping her morning tea. The Meridian systems have officially declared their trade agreements with the Confederation void, her AI reported. 3 other sectors have followed suit. Confederation response ships are encountering unexpected difficulties with their navigation systems. Sarah allowed herself a small sip of actual tea. Unexpected difficulties was a polite way of saying that humanity's hidden countermeasures were working perfectly. The Confederation's mighty warships were finding themselves unable to jump to FTL, their weapon systems mysteriously offline. A priority message flashed across her simple datapad, simple on the surface, at least. High Administrator Verlax was requesting her presence immediately. Sarah took one last look at the chaos unfolding outside her window before heading to the council chambers. She found Verlax's crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated barely controlled rage. Ambassador Chen, he snapped, your species has trade agreements with the Meridian systems, do you not? Minor ones, Sarah replied, letting confusion color her voice. Though I admit, I find much of their technology rather advanced for our current level of development. Then perhaps you can explain why they're suddenly using encryption protocols that bear remarkable similarities to Earth's primitive communication systems. Sarah blinked, the picture of innocence. Similar to ours, but surely their technology is far beyond our capabilities. Could it be a coincidence? Verlax's form shifted, fragments of light suggesting he was about to launch into one of his patronizing lectures. But before he could speak, another emergency alert flashed across the chamber's displays. Sarah didn't need her eyes translation to recognize the patterns of shock and disbelief that rippled through the assembled Confederation officials. Impossible, Verlax whispered. The Thid Collective is refusing our override commands. Their defense grid. He turned to Sarah, suspicion finally beginning to crack through his arrogance. Ambassador, what do you know about this? The Thid? Sarah made a show of checking her datapad. I believe we've had some cultural exchanges with them. Fascinating species, though their technology seems quite different from ours. Another alert. Then another. Across Confederation space, subject species were discovering that the control systems built into their ships and stations had mysteriously failed. Some were failing spectacularly, broadcasting their shutdown codes to every nearby vessel. This is no coincidence. Verlax's voice had lost its patronizing edge, replaced by something closer to fear. Somehow, Earth is. High Administrator, Sarah interrupted, dropping her confused act for just a moment. I think you're letting paranoia cloud your judgment. How could a primitive species like Earth possibly affect systems we barely understand? The emphasis she placed on primitive was subtle, but Verlax caught it. His crystalline form froze as 6 months of carefully constructed deception suddenly began to unravel in his mind. He began, but another alarm cut him off. Emergency alert, the station's AI announced. Critical system failure detected in primary control networks. Automated security protocols disabled. Station defense grid offline. Sarah stood up, straightening her deliberately outdated uniform. It seems you're having some technical difficulties, High Administrator. If you'll excuse me, I should check on my ship. We primitive species tend to get nervous when more advanced technology starts failing. Security. Verlax shouted, detain the Earth ambassador. But the security forces were dealing with their own problems. Their supposedly unbreakable quantum-linked weapons had all simultaneously entered maintenance mode. The automated defense systems that should have sealed the chamber were broadcasting error messages in 1,000 different languages. An interesting thing about technology, Sarah said conversationally as she walked to the door, is that it's only as good as your understanding of it. When you rely on systems you haven't improved or even truly maintained for centuries, you tend to miss the subtle weaknesses. Primitive species, on the other hand, have to really understand what they build. She paused at the threshold, watching as more emergency alerts flooded the displays. Across Confederation space, the carefully maintained facade of absolute control was crumbling. Ships refused to accept commands. Defense grids turned themselves off. Communication networks began broadcasting proof of centuries of corruption and exploitation. Perhaps, Sarah suggested to the stunned Confederation officials, it's time we had an honest discussion about the future of galactic civilization. One where you don't call all the shots. Through her quantum link, Sarah could sense Earth's hidden fleets moving into position, ready to protect any species that chose to break away from Confederation control. The supposedly primitive Artemis had already dropped its masking field, revealing enough firepower to hold off an entire Confederation battle group. The revolution wouldn't be fought with weapons, though. It had already been won through patience, planning, and the Confederation's own blind arrogance. They had spent so long looking down on primitive species that they never noticed those species looking right back, learning, adapting, and preparing. Don't worry, Sarah said to the shocked silence of the chamber. We're not here to replace you as the galaxy's overlords. We just want to level the playing field a bit. Now, shall we discuss those trade agreements again? The Grand Council chamber of the Archean Confederation had never seen such chaos. Emergency lights pulsed across crystalline walls as reports of system failures and rebellions poured in from every sector. High Administrator Verlax stood at the center of the storm, his once pristine form now flickering with patterns of rage and disbelief. You've been playing us from the start, he accused Sarah, who remained calm in her simple chair. Above them, holographic displays showed hundreds of Confederation ships drifting powerless in space. Everything. Your primitive technology, your grateful acceptance of our guidance. It was all a lie. Sarah stood, finally dropping the carefully maintained facade of deference. Not everything. We genuinely do want peaceful coexistence. We just disagree about what that looks like. The chamber's main display suddenly activated, showing a massive Earth fleet dropping out of FTL at the edge of the system. But these weren't the crude vessels the Confederation had been shown. These ships moved with impossible grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields far beyond anything the Confederation possessed. Impossible, one of the council members whispered. Your species couldn't have hidden this level of technology. Our scanners. Your scanners saw exactly what we wanted them to see, Sarah interrupted. Just like your secure networks only accessed the data we wanted you to find. Did you never wonder why a supposedly primitive species was so eager to accept your outdated control systems? Through the grand windows of the chamber, they could see more Earth ships appearing. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering, combining technologies the Confederation had thought impossible to merge. But more telling were the vessels appearing alongside them. Ships from dozens of supposedly subjugated species, all now flying free of Confederation control. You didn't just deceive us, Verlax realized, his crystalline form paling. You united our vassals against us. They united themselves, Sarah corrected. We just showed them it was possible. Your control systems weren't nearly as foolproof as you thought. Not when someone took the time to really understand how they worked. A new alert flashed across the displays. Throughout Confederation space, the supposedly unbreakable quantum locks on restricted technology were failing. Species that had been forced to rely on the Confederation for basic functions were discovering their systems could work independently. What are your demands? Another council member asked, their voice shaking. Will Earth now take the Confederation's place? Sarah shook her head. We didn't do all this to become the new tyrants. Humanity has a different proposal. She gestured, and her simple datapad projected a hologram far more sophisticated than anything the Confederation had seen. It showed a new structure for galactic civilization, one built on mutual cooperation rather than dominance and control. Your technological advantage wasn't the problem, Sarah explained. It was how you used it. Instead of lifting other species up, you kept them down. Instead of fostering innovation, you stifled it. That ends today. Through her quantum link, Sarah could sense the changes rippling across Confederation space. The carefully maintained hierarchies were dissolving. Species that had been forced to depend on Confederation technology were awakening to their own potential. You're insane, Verlax sputtered. You'll throw the galaxy into chaos. Without our guidance. Without your control, you mean? Sarah cut him off. Look around, Administrator. Look at what these primitive species have already accomplished. The Meridians have developed shield technology that surpasses yours. The Cthid Collective's AI systems are decades ahead of anything you possess, and humanity. We've spent centuries perfecting technologies you never even thought to explore. As if to emphasize her point, the lights in the chamber flickered. When they returned, the Confederation's vaunted defensive systems had been completely shut down. Their quantum-encrypted computers were now running on basic protocols that any species could access and understand. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah announced to the stunned council. The Confederation will release all species from their protection treaties. Technology will be freely shared and developed. And if you try to stop this, she gestured to the armada of ships visible through the chamber windows. Well, let's just say humanity spent a lot of time preparing for that possibility. A new message flashed across the displays, the first of many species formally declaring their independence from Confederation control. The council members watched in horror as their carefully maintained empire began to crumble. Your choice is simple, Sarah concluded. Join us in building something better, or watch from the sidelines as the galaxy moves forward without you. And remember, if you try to maintain your control by force, you'll discover just how much of our primitive technology we haven't shown you yet. The message was clear. The age of Confederation dominance was over. A new era was beginning. One where humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been their hidden technology, but their ability to unite others in the cause of freedom. 1 year after the fall of the Archean Confederation's control systems, Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly on Earth. The vast chamber, with its seamless blend of technologies from 100 different species, symbolized everything they had fought to achieve. Through the chamber's transparent dome, ships from across the galaxy moved in complex patterns, their designs as varied as the species that created them. No longer bound by Confederation restrictions, Each civilization was free to develop their own path to the stars. The latest reports from the Transition Council are encouraging, her AI assistant noted through their quantum link. 93% of former Confederation worlds have successfully integrated their own technological innovations with the shared knowledge base. Sarah watched as representatives from dozens of species filed into the chamber. The Meridians, their leaf-like forms now augmented with their own unique biotechnology. The crystalline Archons, humbled but adapting to their new role as equals rather than rulers. The Cthid, their quantum processors now openly shared with other species. Administrator Verlax has arrived, her AI announced. His vital signs suggest significant anxiety. Sarah turned to see the former High Administrator enter, his crystalline form notably less ornate than in his days of power. Ambassador Chen. He greeted her, his voice carrying a mix of resignation and curiosity. Or should I say council leader now? Just ambassador, Sarah corrected. Earth declined a permanent leadership position. We believe rotating governance will better serve everyone's interests. Verlax's form shifted in what humans had learned was a gesture of confusion. Even after everything you achieved, your species orchestrated the greatest political upheaval in galactic history. You could have taken control of everything. That was never the goal, Sarah explained, leading him to the observation deck. Below them, the assembly chamber was filling with representatives from across known space. Look at what's been accomplished in just 1 year. She gestured to a group of Meridian scientists demonstrating their latest advances in biological computing to an eager audience of various species. Nearby, Cthid engineers were collaborating with former Confederation technicians on improvements to FTL drive efficiency. When you remove artificial barriers, Sarah continued, when you stop forcing species to depend on technology they don't understand, amazing things happen. The Helix Cooperative has already developed medical techniques that surpass anything Earth or the Confederation had. The Outer Rim Alliance's new shield systems are revolutionary. But the chaos, Verlax protested, though with less conviction than before. The disruption to established orders has led to more progress in 1 year than the Confederation saw in centuries, Sarah finished. Because real advancement doesn't come from control, it comes from cooperation, from the sharing of different perspectives and approaches. The chamber's main display activated, showing a real-time map of known space. Trade routes pulsed with activity, research centers glowed with breakthrough notifications, and diplomatic channels hummed with constant dialogue between worlds that once barely acknowledged each other's existence. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't defeating the Confederation, Sarah explained. It was showing everyone that there was a better way. That true strength comes from lifting each other up, not holding others down. The assembly session was about to begin. Representatives took their seats, not arranged in hierarchical tiers as in the old Confederation chamber, but in a circular pattern that emphasized equality and cooperation. There will be challenges, Sarah acknowledged. Conflicts to resolve, disagreements to navigate. But look at how far we've come in just 1 year. Imagine what we'll achieve in 10 or 100. Verlax was quiet for a moment, studying the chamber below. I'm beginning to understand, he said finally, why you hid your true capabilities for so long. If you had simply revealed your power, we would have just been another empire to be feared or resisted. Sarah nodded. Instead, we showed everyone that change was possible. That technology should serve all species, not control them. The session was called to order. Today's agenda included the approval of 3 new species for membership, the establishment of open-source technology exchanges, and the formation of multi-species research initiatives. The galaxy is entering a golden age, Sarah told Verlax. Not because of Earth or the former Confederation, but because for the first time, everyone has a voice in shaping the future. As she took her seat among equals, Sarah reflected on humanity's journey. They had come to the stars prepared for conflict, but found a better path. Through patience, cunning, and an unwavering belief in the potential of all species, they had helped forge a new kind of galactic civilization. The old Confederation had ruled through force and fear. The new Galactic Assembly would thrive through cooperation and shared progress. And humanity's greatest victory wasn't in defeating an empire, but in showing the galaxy a better way forward. The future was uncertain, but it was free. And that made all the difference.